I've been listening to a lot of podcasts lately, man.
Yeah, you
Like
have. You've been sending me a lot of clips, man.
different
It's
ones
good.
too. Like I've
Yeah.
been finding some different podcasts. My son has gotten into some, and then I don't know why. I don't know why I think like some of the podcasts I listen to, there hasn't been a lot of new stuff or guests that I'm interested in. So I've kind of explored on Spotify some other things. But it's been a new kind of information I've been receiving because I kind of got in the zone a lot of like, I was watching Modern Wisdom and Joe Rogan podcast, and there was a lot of like, just philosophy. There was a lot of philosophy lately, and then I started listening to some other things that were more tactical. Diary of a CEO is a good one. What's Tom Balut's Impact Theory? So I went kind of back to some of the old ones that I used to listen to, and it was nice because they didn't put out like Lex Friedman. I like his podcast a lot, but he hasn't been putting out podcasts a lot. I mean, he's trying to create robots, so I get it.
I get it. Okay, that makes sense. The robots will be hosting his podcast going forward.
Yeah, and then but it's made me think a lot about our podcast, and it's like, well, for our podcast, like, is it where we want it to be? And I think so many business owners go through that. It's like the grass is always greener on the other side. And I heard on one of these podcasts about that is like the grass is always greener on the other side because it's full of shit. And like they're talking about it's fertilized, and it's like, yeah, well, it does. It looks really great over there, but they filled it with shit over and over and over and over again. And I've just been finding with ourselves and other business owners that like you got to go through the shit. You got to go through that. If you want that grass to be greener, you have to take the time to like go through the shit. And there's so many people that want instant gratification, and I've been guilty of that as well, but as we work with our clients who are in the course and our clients who we do coaching, there's a big wide gap of the mentality of those two people. And it's the people who are in the course are more in immediacy mode. I wouldn't say they're in desperation, but they're in this immediacy of like, I have to generate revenue, where a lot of our other clients who are on the coaching side, they're thinking more long term. But thinking long term is like, well, I'm not going to go through the shit. I'm going to plan on what shit I'm going to go through. And then thinking on this immediacy, they're kind of like, I just have to do whatever I have to do right now. And they're not actually thinking of like, is that good shit or bad shit? Is that good fertilizer for the business I'm building or bad fertilizer? And there's this, I guess it's good that they're not precise on it because that gives us work to do. But that's what I've been finding is like, what is the shit that we all want to go through, and how do we determine what is right for our current situation and the path that we're walking to the destination that we want to get to, but also need to get to. And that's the thing is like, you can fertilize your grass with many, many different things. But if you put shit in the backyard, it stinks. There's other fertilizers to use to grow something. And that's the methodology that we try to go through with people, and we've been rebranding ourselves kind of as intuitive coaches, and we have amazing skill sets, and we have a history of helping a lot of people. But really where our value is listening to what people are going through, and then just this gut feeling, this intuition of like, oh, here's what you actually mean. And based on other experiences, okay, what I'm thinking right now, you're needing is this, and it's just this intuition of it. And I think that's what's allowing us to have a deeper impact with many of the people we're working with. And that's what I feel. It's been a much deeper impact than this superficial way of working with people.
You bring up a lot of good points there. There's two things that kind of make me think about what I wanted to talk about today. The comparison element is there for a lot of those newer business owners, right? There's people who are starting out and they're looking at everybody else and they're looking at other business owners and what they've done. And there's this need for instant gratification to get this done as quickly as possible. And they constantly are comparing themselves to other people and they feel like they should be at a certain point because these other people are at a point. I mean, one of our clients even yesterday was like, this guy says he's been in business for a year and he has 20 employees and all of that. And, I've been doing all this work for the last 3 years and I have 5 employees, right? So the comparison element kind of gets in that way and makes you think that the grass is greener somewhere else. And what you have to remember is and this is what we have to remind our people over and over, is that when you're comparing, you have to recognize you're just comparing on the surface level, right? You're looking at the finished product. You're looking at or a version of a finished product, right? I've been watching this as I drive my daughter to school every day. There's a new house that's being built right at the end of the road that we come to before I turn left to go to the school. And it was making me think about it. Like when you see a house that's a shell versus a finished house, you don't appreciate everything that went into building that house when you're just looking at the finished product. And when you're comparing yourself over and over, you have to remember at one point that land was clear. There was no foundation. There was no framing. There was nothing on the inside. And as they build that house, they add layers to that house. So when you compare to other people, you often forget all of the shit that they went through to get to where they are right now. And you can't let that distract you from building your own thing and recognizing that you have to go through your own shit. You got to dig it up. You got to fertilize it. You got to plant it. You got to do all that stuff to make the grass look green at your house. And that's the thing that people forget. And the other thing that you made me think about was intuition and how we are really helping people to get in touch with what they already know. But when you're comparing yourself or you're thinking the grass is greener somewhere else, you lose that trust of your intuition because now your brain takes over and your mind takes over and your ego takes over. And everything that you know intuitively that you need to do, you're now looking for some way to get permission for it. Intuition should never require you to go get permission. Your intuition is the thing that guides you. It's the thing that tells you this is the right thing to go do next. And if it doesn't work out fully the way you expect it, that's where the learning lesson comes from. But it's your intuition guiding you to learn that lesson. Right? Not just because it's intuition doesn't mean it's 100% right. It may be a pathway to figuring out what is right. It's the lesson that comes through it sometimes that we fail to recognize. But when we're comparing to other people and we think the grass is greener somewhere else, we are now getting too caught up in our minds and thinking just about, oh my goodness, I need to be here. I need permission to, and then when we talk to people, it's like, oh, I already knew that. And that's the truth. It is. Adam and I just give people permission to do what they already know they need to do.
It's impatience too. They have their intuition and maybe they don't trust it. Maybe they do. They're comparing to other people, but that grass is greener on the other side, not just because they fertilized it, but because it also took time, right? There's a growing season, right? Just because you plant seeds and you do certain things doesn't mean that all of a sudden everything works. And, most people don't understand that business takes a decade. Like it takes a really long time to build a successful business. Doesn't mean you can't make money before the decade is up. But what usually happens is it takes about 3 years to build a foundation of a business. It takes, another couple of years to exploit that foundation that you have. Then after that, you start bringing in people to really help you and you have specialists inside of your business. You do that for a few years and then you really start scaling your company. And that's how that decade works. And it's different time frames for everybody, but it usually takes about that long. But unfortunately, what's happening for most people is they restart that decade over and over and over again. And they get like 6 months in and then they're like, all right, I'm going to try something completely different that's not in line with what they were already doing. And when you're building your company and it takes that decade, it's better for you to stay in the same lane and then iterate than it is to just go off this lane and start something completely different. Like, I have been an advisor for 25 years now, right? Everything that I have done stems from advice. I didn't all of a sudden say, hey, I'm going to go be a copywriter, because I love to write. And I didn't say, okay, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go become a professional golfer because I love to golf and I've gotten better at it. But that's the thing, is like, so many people are like, hey, I'm going to drastically change what I'm doing and not stay on the path and keep getting better and better and better at that. And then even sometimes locally in their business, they're going too far off of it, right? And it typically stems from a desperation, okay, or a fear of missing out. Like, oh my gosh, other people in my industry are doing this new thing. I have to do it too. And it's like, but you don't. You have to continue to get better at what you are the best at currently. And if you work on getting better at what you're currently best at, you're going to be even better at that thing. And that's what it like frustrates me, is that they just constantly restart that decade, restart it. And it's like, yeah, sometimes they go a year or two, but then they're like, oh, I'm going to pivot here and do this. And it's like, holy shit, now we got to start the clock again. And nobody wants that. Nobody wants to start the clock again. They just don't know that they're doing that. They're saying like, oh, I took all these skills from this other thing that I've done and I'm going to apply them to this new thing I'm going to do. But you got to relearn a lot of things. And it's frustrating for me. It's sad to see, because anytime someone starts a new thing, you actually have more dopamine and more excitement about that than when you're going through it, and even when you complete it and achieve the success. So it's, is it more people's need for the excitement because they don't want to go through that shit? Or is it really like they're not trusting what they have to build and what they have to go through in order to build that thing?
Right. Part of it is that they're not trusting what they need to go do to build that thing, because they fail to recognize business is simple. It's just not easy, that they have to choose their hard, right? You got to choose the hard that you're going to go through. And I think a lot of times when people restart, it's because they're avoiding the hard that they're up against right now, and they need to go start something else. But what people have to recognize is business is bipolar. Okay, there's a constant bipolar approach to, going from being very optimistic to being down in the dumps, like this shit's not going to work. It's not going to happen. And then going back to that level of optimism, like, oh yeah, I can go do this. And it's this vicious cycle over and over. I've worked with so many bipolar people, I feel, in the course of my lifetime, not just as a physician assistant and when I was doing psych and teaching psych, but like business owners, we're bipolar. I mean, we work on two spectrums all the time. And a lot of people want to avoid that bipolar behavior. But you have to understand, business is an ebb and a flow. There's going to be peaks and valleys. The key is to try to keep those peaks and valleys as close to a baseline as possible. When we treat somebody with, according to the DSM-5's definition of bipolar, the key is to not make the manic episodes so manic, and to keep the depressive episodes to a minimum and not be so depressive. And what medication does is it tries to keep that mainstream. But for business owners, what you need to try to do is you have to recognize that it is going to be this sine wave, up and down, be this bipolar experience, but you can't allow yourself to get too manic or too depressed. You got to recognize that this is just part of doing business, and don't avoid that. Use the ebbs and the part of the experience to reevaluate what you're doing, not become discouraged by what you're doing. And I think that's the thing, that when people go into that ebb, when business is not flowing, and we've seen this with everybody in the last couple of months, right? A lot of our business owners are struggling. Business has not been great for a lot of people. There's a lot of uncertainty with the economy and everything that's happening. But use this time as constructive time. Use this valley to really start to figure out a way to lift the valley up to the hill, and not get stuck in the valley and dig yourself deeper. And if you can embrace that and not avoid it, it'll stop you from doing those restarts over and over. Because some people will just deviate and restart because the valley really sucks. Again, it's just you're wading through the shit. You gotta sometimes wade through the shit to get to the other side of things. Andy Dufresne, my best friend, from Shawshank Redemption, he waded through 500 yards of shit to come out clean on the other side. But that's what we all have to do. We have to recognize this, that you're going to have ebbs and flows, but the key is not to let those things be extremes, but to be a simple up and down. But if you avoid them and you don't address the ebbs, it creates this need to go somewhere else and get distracted and make comparisons and look for the grass that might be greener because you're just avoiding going through the hard that exists at that moment.
Hey, sorry to interrupt, but if you're dealing with problems every single day and have no clue how to handle them, then check us out. Go to atomicbusinesscoaching.com, see what we're doing. We have the Simple CEO, which will allow you to truly become a CEO. Go check it out, atomicbusinesscoaching.com. A lot of times when they're doing that, they're thinking like, okay, I'm going to 10x my sales. I'm going to 10x my business. I'm going to really like explode this thing. And it's, most people don't. Like you don't 10x your business, and certainly not when you make a change, right? It's like you have to stop trying to grow outside of what you're able to grow in. And it's, I've been guilty of it in the past too, where, I had a company that we were going out and working with other companies to do their benefits, and like, holy cow, we got one amazing opportunity. And it was like, if we just do this over and over again, we can 10x our revenue. And it's like, so you build the plan out to do that. And there's a decade of work in there. It's like, you can't do that. And I think most people who are trying to 10x, it's possible, but not in the time frame that they're giving themselves. And it's like, you kind of have to 1x, you have to 2x maybe. And it's, most people have a plan and it's like, I'm going to execute it, but then they don't execute the plan needed to 10x. And then they don't give themselves the ability to do it every day. And it's like they keep filling it up because they want to get to that 10x, it's a wonderful possibility. But if you don't allow yourself to 2x, you'll never get to 10. And it's a slow roll. Like you have to go from doing 10 to doing 20. That's not, that's like, okay, well, that's what you're trying to do. Okay. You can't go from 10 to 100 right away. And so many people get caught up in the frustration of it and the like iteration of, well, I'm not 10xing, so I have to do this other thing. And it's like, no, what you're missing is the work in between. And what's that book? Gap to Gain, right?
Yeah, the Gap and the Gain.
Gap and the Gain. And it's like people get frustrated because there's so much more ahead, but they don't look backwards of all that they've achieved in that time frame. And it's like, instead of looking back and achieving it, like plan those little marginal gains along the way. It's like if you plan out like, okay, in order to 10x this thing, here are the steps I have to take. Like you're going to have more, or you're going to feel more optimistic about each next step you have to take because you've achieved something. And that's the issue I see over and over and over again, is like when someone hits that $1 million and they're like, okay, I can take this to a $10 million business. Well, can we get to 2 million first? Like, it would be a life-changing moment if you went from 1 million to 2 million. And I know you think you can get to 10 million. And if we work towards it, you certainly can, but not without getting the 2 million first. And that's the thing, is they're getting outside of themselves so fast, okay, that then they can't actually see what the problems are, and they don't work on the problems of why they're not going from 1 million to 2 million. And then what happens is those problems compound because they're not working on them. And it's just a sad situation to see, but it's kind of how we've been taught as entrepreneurs. Is like, you can 10x this and you can 10x that and you can scale and it's like, yes, you can. Over any amount of time in history, you can do that. And for you, it may be 100 years, not 10 years it's going to take. it is possible, but only if you do the work that's involved inside, and not knowing what the work is to get there and just worrying about the result is usually the biggest problem.
100%. And then you have the flip side of that, where somebody gets to that point of either 100 million or just 300,000 sometimes, right? That they've doubled or tripled their business, and they realize, did I really want this to start with in the first place, right? And because there's a whole new set of problems now that they're taking on, and they've lost, they thought they wanted this, but they didn't realize that they wanted this, but they realized, then I don't know if I really want this. And it creates this whole paradigm of like, what am I doing? And that creates more distraction, and that creates more problems, and where they really start to deviate and avoid and really, that comparison, looking for the grass is greener, is because now I'm looking again for the easy, because the hard got really hard and they don't want to do the hard anymore. But that's where we teach people to be very flexible, right? And being able to adapt and switch roles, right? Because the person that you are sometimes, when you start out in a business, you have this blind optimism. It's going to be great. We're going to do all this stuff, and we're going to be this big company, and it's going to be wonderful, and we're going to make all this money. And then you get into it, and it's like, holy shit, this is a lot of work. This is a lot to make some money, right? And we don't realize all of that. And then you go through that bipolar phases. But the thing is that what you started out doing, what role you started out in, is no longer sometimes the role that you are in when you get to that point. And you have to be flexible and willing to adjust your roles. We do see this a lot in businesses that have partners. Like you and I have switched roles at times, and we have a few clients that, they're one was the CEO for the better part of the first year that we were working with them, and now the partner is the CEO and has to be in charge of running the business and the operation, because that's where their strengths lie, and where they lean into their strengths. And that's part of what, when you get to this point where you recognize, oh my God, is this really what we wanted? It's probably because you now feel like you're not strong in what you've been able to do, and you feel some weaknesses, and you have to lean into your strengths and have people on your team, or figure out the people on your team where you can lean into their strengths, because now you've exceeded your capacity. So you kind of go all over the place, but again, it all happens as you try to build your business to 4x to 10x or whatever it is, but you have to remain adaptable and flexible to get there. And people forget that. They forget they have to be adaptable. They forget that things are going to change as they make more money. There's going to be more problems that come about that you're going to have to solve that you don't have today, that you didn't have yesterday, but now you have today.
Certainly true. And I mean, that's really why we created our Simple Focus program, and we had a client recently go through that. It's a 3-month long program that allows you to figure out, what am I focusing on, and we ask simple questions inside of there, hence the Simple Focus system, right? And it's simply just, who are you and who do you want to be, right? And that's the first one. And then it's, who is the business and who do you want the business to be? And the client who went through that, and there's other questions we ask in there too. We have 4 meetings, but the client that we asked recently, like, who are you and who do you want to be, was so directly tied to who they wanted their business to be. And when they finally uncovered that, of like, no, wait, I have been this in the past, but that's not who I want to be. And they really wanted to make a transition for themselves, but they were so tied to how they got where they were, and they had to continue being that. And it's like, once they understood that, holy cow, I now know who I want to be, it became so clear on who the business should be. Because as a founder of a company, like, you are the business in the beginning. And then people adopt that culture and that philosophy and the things that you do over time. But if you're not authentic to who you really want to be and who you want this business to be, it's always going to be a struggle, not only for you, but for your clients and definitely for your employees. And that clarity and that wisdom is such a gift that people can give to themselves. And yeah, we're lucky enough we get to coach people through that and get them there with our questions. okay, and our conversations and our exploration, but it's really when you take time for yourself and sit back and like, okay, why am I doing this? And that's one of the other questions, like, why are you doing these things? Right. And if it's not tied to who you want to be or who you want the business to be, then why? Why are we continuing to go down this path? And most of the time it's because it's generating the lifestyle that I have become very, very used to. And that's a struggle for people to then pivot. But this is what we're saying is like that pivot that people make sometimes is not to who they want to be and who they want their business to be. It's to some outside influence, whether it be what other people are doing or opportunity for more money and when we start to align that in our simple focus system, when we start to align it in, yeah, you're gonna start a new decade, but you're gonna start your new decade. And that's the key, is like when we're on this journey, we want to be on our journey, not somebody else's.
And that's why we do the where in the simple focus, right? We look at the values that people have, because your value shifts tremendously when you start a business to where you wind up in that business a year, 2, 3 years down the road. And people need to come back and refocus where they want their business to be, because what they usually find out is that there's some lack of alignment between that and what they value and what's important to them. And that's why we go through that in the system to figure that out, so that your next decade is really based on your values. Because what are your values? They're the things that dictate your behaviors and how you behave and how you act, and how you're going to act over the next 10 years of your business and your life needs to be in full alignment. And then we set, the goals and the when we're going to accomplish all this stuff. But without understanding who you want to be, why you're doing this, and understanding where your values are at, you just wind up in this whole cyclical loss of mazes, and you're trying to get out of the cornfield, and it's just way too difficult, and you start yelling for help. But that's exactly why we have the simple focus system.
So, hey, if you're going through some shit and you're still here listening to us, well, let's help you figure out if that's the right shit to grow the right thing that you want to do. And if you can have some patience, and if you can have some removal of that comparison of other people. And this is really what we're doing. And hey, don't feel bad if you are bipolar, right? We all kind of are, but that's why Tom's saying, you have to have these different roles, and you have to understand which roles that you're in. And sometimes you got to change them, but for your path that you want to go on. So check out atomicbusinesscoaching.com. There's a ton of things we're doing there. We have courses, we have communities, we have one-on-one coaching, and obviously this podcast and our newsletters and stuff. So check it out, atomicbusinesscoaching.com, and hope to see you on the next episode.